Now that we're centered, let's open this clay up. So just like centering, there's not really one way to open your well to begin to throw your form. So you're gonna have to decide which ones works best for you. You can hug the clay with your fingers and lift your thumbs up and push down with both of your thumbs. You could hold with one hand and push down with one thumb. Some people like to sink the heel of their hand down to start to open it. I don't like to do that usually with cylinders, but maybe like a plate or a large bowl that could work. Or some people like to use a couple fingers, just their index finger, or like 3 fingers. So you can figure out what works for you. The biggest thing is making sure you're supporting the clay when you go to open it, because just because you have centered this clay does not mean it stays centered. You can kick it off center so easily. I just kicked it off center, trying to show you how you can, the different ways you can open it. I like to push my thumbs down about 1 inch, then I shift to the crab claw. So these 3 fingers, my pinky is going to support. These 3 fingers are gonna push down. My thumb is gonna be on the outside, so that's where the crab claw comes in. And right hand is gonna be supporting on the outside. So I'm pushing down, my 3 longest fingers, my thumb's on the outside, my right hand supporting. So I push down until I have about 1/4 inch of clay on the bottom. So you can check that with your needle tool. So I'll take my needle tool, stab it down, take my index finger, touch the floor of my form, and pull up. And I can see I have 1/4 inch that I've left on the bottom. Right now, I only have about a 50-cent size surface area. I need to make that wider before I begin to do my pulls, because I have so much clay locked in here. I want to open this up a little bit more. So I've set the floor. Now I'm going to open it up. To do that, I'm going to go back to the crab claw method. So these 3 fingers supported with the pinky kind of holds them and locks them in. And then my thumb on the outside, and then my right hand supporting on the outside to make sure I don't kick it off center. So I'm pushing out. So I'm basically squeezing these fingers into my thumb while I push pressure, a little pressure down, but mostly out into this corner. So out to open that up. You are gonna get a little bit of a rise in the middle, and then it's gonna become a little thinner closer to the outside edge. So I do wanna even that out. So I'm just gonna make basically like a little rib with my fingers. I'm gonna apply pressure down in the middle, and you can see I'm supporting my movement of my right hand with my left hand. You're never gonna have one hand doing something on its own, because if I'm doing this with just this hand, you can see I don't have as much control. But as soon as I support this hand with my opposite hand, I have so much control. So you wanna make sure your hands are always supporting one another. So if you have a hard time using your fingers, you can also push your sponge down to even that out. And now I have a nice wide bottom. You really want to make sure you open the floor of your cylinder at least to the size of a standard throwing sponge. So you want to make sure that you can rest this in here. I have quite a bit of space, but I would say 2.5, 3 inches, or put your standard sponge in and make sure you can set it down. And then I'm gonna collar it in a little bit. So basically just hugging the clay with both hands and applying pressure inward. comes to pulling, you are going to be using more of the finger beds on the inside. So right away, these finger beds are gonna be in the corner on the inside. The thumb will be on the outside supporting. And then on the outside, I'm gonna be using more of my tips. And my fingertips are gonna push in right away to lift that clay up. And then my hand shifts, my fingers shift, and they apply pressure inward. So my fingers are riding right on this inside corner. My outside hand pushes in, my fingers pushed in. You can see they lifted that clay up. Now we have to work this clay up to the top. So my inside hand is slightly above my outside hand. And I'm just working to move that clay up. I stop just shy of the rim. Then I check my rim, which just basically means I want to compress it a little bit to keep it nice and contained. So I'm gonna take my thumb and index finger and then my right hand opposite index finger and apply a little pressure down while I'm supporting by kind of lightly pinching with my left hand. Now we got to get back in here. You can go ahead and collar it again if you want. The reason I like to keep it a little narrower on the top and wider on the bottom is you really need to lighten up on your pressure about halfway up, because down here the clay is locked to the wheel head, but up here it's not. So you can have a lot greater impact on this top portion than on the bottom. So it's best to ease off on your pressure a little bit when you get up here. And a lot of the time we forget, so what happens is the top will start to get wider and wider and wider, and then pretty soon your cylinder has got a very wide top and a narrow bottom. So to counter that, if you start with it collared a little bit, even if you're forgetting to lighten up on your pressure, in the end you should end up with a nice cylinder. You want the flat bottom and the nice straight side. So it's like two L's coming together. Put your thumbs together. You want flat, flat. You don't want to leave a bunch of clay locked in here. That's how you create that bell bottom. We're not trimming these. Okay, so taking my left hand, just sliding it right down this inside edge. You see I'm locking my thumb in because it's, well, the thumb, I think the thumb can still be on the outside, yeah, because I can still reach down in here. There's gonna come a point where this gets too tall, where your thumb has to get tucked in and ride along with that inside, but right now it can still stay on the outside. So these beds are in right here on this inside edge. Pushing in, you can see my pinky is locking in my ring finger, my thumb is supporting my index and middle finger, and really keeping this contained. So you want this nice and tight and contained. I'm pushing in, lifting that clay up. You can see my inside hand is slightly above. It's pushing out just a little bit. My outside hand is pushing in, and in that little bit of a cavity in between, they're working together to move that clay up. Stop just shy of the rim. Compress. Clean it off. Coming back in again. Now you can see, this is what I'm talking about. It's taller. Go ahead and collar it if you want. I gotta lock my thumb in. I'm gonna slide it down the inside edge here. So these finger beds can be down in here. You have to make sure your hands are basically touching each other through the clay, or at least close enough to touching that they're creating pressure, so this is being supportive. If you're pushing with your outside hand just against the clay, you're gonna kick this off center. You need to have the inside hand there to support it. Same goes on the opposite. So I'm sliding this inside hand in. My beds are in place in that corner. my ring finger on that one was pushing in, moving that clay up. You can see that little bulge from my inside hand. Once I bring my thumb to the outside. So I'm pushing in with my outside hand. My inside hand is in there riding along, providing that support. Stopping just shy of the rim. I'm gonna take my thumb and index finger and have them just ride on the top of that rim. And then I'm gonna apply a little pressure down with my index finger. I don't use a ton of water when I throw. You can see I create a lot of slurry, but I don't have any water in my basin, just slurry. So if you're using a lot of water, you do not want to get water hanging out on the inside of your form while you're throwing. So after each pull, just get in the habit of taking your wrung out sponge and sucking up any of that water. If you don't have water in there, you don't have to worry about it, but you really don't want to leave water in there because it's going to be breaking down that clay on the inside, and then when this goes to dry, the outside is going to dry a lot faster than the inside because the inside clay is more wet and you could end up with a crack. It's not as common with cylinders, more common with bowls, but you do want to get in the habit of not leaving standing water in the bottom of your form. Once again, I'm going to get this bed, these finger beds into this inside corner. You don't want your elbow like this. You want it locked in. So I'm sliding my inside hand in. And it's weird, you guys. It's gonna feel uncomfortable. You feel very contorted. That's just how it is. Once again, my knees are locked in. Locking my elbow in, sliding down in. I'm right over this form. Pushing in with my fingers on the outside. You can see that bulge from my inside hand. The thinner your form gets, the easier it is to knock this thing off center or make your form go tumbling down because the clay is getting more and more thin. When you start, your inside hand is gonna be higher because on the outside, you can start right at the wheel head, which is lower than on the inside. You have the floor of the clay form. So no matter what you do, your inside hand's always gonna be starting a little above because you can't push all the way down to the wheel head on the inside or else you'll have a big hole in the bottom of your cylinder. It's always on the inside, starting a little above, but the space is minor so they can create that nice tension and pressure to control this form. About halfway up the form, they are basically touching. Like if this cylinder was made out of glass, you would see my finger touching, my fingertips touching my finger bed. So on the inside, I'm really using my finger bed, and a lot of the time, like the length, my finger beds, and then the length of my index finger. Okay, so we're getting nice and thin at this point. So I'm gonna start to clean up this form and see where we're at. See if I feel like I left a little clay in the middle. Most of the time when you're beginning, you're gonna leave extra clay down here at the bottom. You don't wanna do that. That's where I call that the reserve. That's the reserve clay that you want to use to make your form taller. So at this point, let's clean it up a little bit. So you're gonna need your wooden knife. You're gonna use your flat edge. If you can't get your hand on the inside anymore because it got too narrow, you don't have to necessarily have it in there for support, but I like to put it in there to support the pressure. And I'm gonna take the tip of the tool, so I'm basically applying pressure with this whole edge, but the tip is kind of drilling in a little bit more, and I'm applying that pressure in pushing that tip down to the wheel head to get any of that excess clay off. Then I'm gonna take my needle tool and I'm gonna cut through, ride it under that, and then you'll be able to just grab that clay away. You can reuse any of your clay that you've thrown. If something doesn't work out, then you can just put it in like a rainbow arch shape and let it dry out just a little bit, and then re-wedge it and throw it again. Get any water out of the bottom here. I'm gonna do one more final pull just to see if it seems like the walls are nice and uniform. So these little ridges are your throw lines. Those are your fingers where they're pushing in. If you don't like those, or if your form, you've been throwing with too much water, so your form seems a little too soft and a little weak, you can use a rib and compress it, because that compression is gonna make your wall stronger. If you wanna decorate this and you don't want the throw lines to interrupt, then you can take a rib and get rid of them. So I'm just supporting a little bit on the inside. I'm using the curved side of the rib, and I'm just applying a little bit of pressure. And I'm removing those throw lines, and I'm also compressing, and compressing makes clay stronger. And I'm gonna do the wooden knife one more time. Get rid of those throw lines on the bottom. Get rid of any excess clay down on the bottom. Then we want to make sure that we make space for our wire tool to move under our form. So I'm gonna take this wooden tool now, and I'm gonna lay it flat on the wheel head. And I'm gonna push, actually angle it up a little bit, so I can push that point in. Then I'm gonna flip this over, and I'm gonna push it in just a little bit to give this a nice beveled edge. It gives me about an 1/8 inch bevel on the bottom. So it's gonna give me this line about an 1/8 inch from the bottom where I can stop my glaze. So I have a little bit of space if there's any running. And it also kind of gives this form foot. So it gives it like a little lift, so it looks a little less heavy. And it's just gonna have a nicer edge as well. I won't have that flat, sharp edge on the bottom. I'm gonna round my top edge. So I'm just rolling my index, so I'm supporting with my thumb and index finger, and then I'm rolling my right hand index finger over that top and on the inside edge. And that gives it a little bevel, but if you want to tighten that bevel, you can take this metal rib and just push onto the rim, and it'll give it a little bevel. So if you are going to use this for drinking out of it, then that liquid will be more directed into your mouth. To remove your cylinder from the wheel, you want to have clean, dry hands. So that's where having a towel comes in handy. And I'm going to wrap the wire around my fingers, and I'm going to hold it down on the wheel head with my thumbs, and I'm going to pull the wire towards me. Since I pulled it towards me, it's going to work a lot easier. You want to lift from the bottom, not at the top. It's going to work a lot easier if I lift away from me, and I'll be able to lift this off and put it onto a wear board and do another one. Okay, I'll see you guys later. Have a great day or night, whatever time it is when you're watching this. Bye.